Hello, my name is Kelani and I'm the Advanced Audit and Assurance Tutor at Phoenix Financial Training, and this video are the exam tips for AAA. Now, the first thing that you need to know is basically the exam structure. You have two sections in the exam, Section A and Section B. Section A is 50% of the exam, which is based on one case study. So it is one question, but there are multiple requirements that are based on that one scenario. Section B has two questions, each one is worth 25 marks. Now, what are coming in these questions? Now, question 1 is basically focused on the planning stage of the audit. Now, more likely than not, this question comes as a group question. So it's really important to understand any group characteristics when it comes to planning an audit. Now, the requirements are generally 4 requirements, sometimes 5 requirements as part of that question number 1. Definitely 100% you will be asked about audit risks. So what are audit risks and explaining audit risks? Remember, in your answer you need to clearly identify the risk, the standard, and how does it impact the financial statements. That's the main risk, understatement, overstatement. Please do not forget that. Generally, the second requirement can be identifying, explaining business risk, which doesn't come all the time, but it comes half of the time, so 50%. Do not base your guess or judgment if it's going to come or not based on the prior year sitting, because the examiner can bring business risks 2 sittings in a row or may not bring business risks 2 sittings in a row. So please don't try to play fortune teller and try to guess if it's going to come or not. Just make sure that you know it, expecting it in the exam. With business risks, please make sure that you identify business risks. Business risks are the risks that the business does not achieve its objectives. So it's basically the impact on cash flow, profit, and so on, reputation, how the company is going to survive in the future. Has nothing to do with audit risks. Also remember, a point in a scenario can be both a business risk and an audit risk, and there is no problem with that. You can mention them because the explanation is quite different. Now, the third requirement generally comes to be procedures. Procedures about a specific item or a couple of items. So remember with the procedures always to identify it based on rare copy. So the verbs that you're going to use, inspecting, recalculating, reperforming, analytical procedures. Make sure that you explain why you are doing it. Basically what assertion you're trying to find out, or basically what do you want to prove. Now, the fourth requirement generally comes in the exam. It's a bit of knowledge bit. So that has to do with the planning stage of the audit. So in this case, I cannot really identify what it is. Every sitting is quite different, but it's a little bit of knowledge bit that comes in question number 1. And the final requirement in the question is basically your ethics question, so your ethical consideration. Now, what you need to consider is ethics is more than just threats and fundamental principles. They're mainly, yes, threats and fundamental principles. However, there can be many other ethical issues to discuss, such as, for example, conflict of interest or independence or confidentiality. So you have to be careful about all of these bits. Now, the structure of the answer in question number 1 is basically going to be based on a briefing notes. That's where you get your professional marks. And these are the marks, guys, that you have to aim to get 4 out of 4. So the 4 marks are based on basically the headings, to, from, subject. Then it's based on the introduction and conclusion. The third one is based on the structure of the answer, so having subheadings and paragraphs. And the final one is basically the language and flow. If it makes sense, you'll get the mark. So that is question number 1. So question number 1, 50% of the exam, you aim to complete it in an hour and a half. Now, section B, we've got 2 questions. Each one is worth 25 marks. We know one of them is going to be about the completion and reporting stage. So what are the matters you consider, the accounting issues that you're going to consider at completion? You're going to have some accounting problems, and either the impact or the report or criticizing an audit report. Now, the last question, the examiner said that it's going to be from any other part of the syllabus, which is most likely to be other assurance services, quality control. So these are the main topics that come within that section. So other assurance services are always tested, and it can be anything. It can be due diligence, can be PFI, can be forensic, can be any of the other assurance services. And quality control is always 100% always tested in the exam. So quality control and professional issues, basically identifying if in the scenario if there are any problems. Now, the main tip that I would say for AAA is that you need to manage your time really well. Many students come out of the exam and they say, I did not finish the exam, and it is a lengthy exam. It is a very lengthy exam. The scenarios are long and you have to write so much. But remember, at the end of the day, it's quality over quantity. So you will write a lot, but remember to write smart at the same time. So what you really need to do is that you need to have a proper answer plan. So when you're starting reading the question, when you're identifying the requirements, read the scenario once, not more than once, but read it properly. Read it answering all of the requirements, highlighting, underlying, putting points, colors, whatever you want to be able to answer the question with reading the scenario only one time. Make sure that you identify how many points do you really need. So for example, if audit risks is 20 marks, you'll have to think, I need at least around 7, 8, maybe 9 points in my answer to be able to get sufficient marks. If you write 6 points, that is a bit low. So you need to write enough to get those marks. So you need to make an answer plan to be able to identify how many points am I writing and so on. And also to structure your answer. So for example, with audit risk, you have to write materiality, accounting standard, the risk, and discussing the issue. So you have to make sure that you have an answer plan to be able to identify all of the points that you need to write in your answer so you don't miss on any marks. One more thing, when you're dividing your time, make sure that you look at the subsections. So for example, you know that question 1 is going to be an hour and a half of your exam, which is basically half your exam. But if audit risks is 25 marks, so that's half that time, 45 minutes. Once you reach that 45-minute stop, make sure that you stop, guys, and move on. If you haven't identified all of the audit risks by that point, anything else you're going to identify is going to be worth less marks, because you always provide most of your knowledge at that beginning part of that question. One more thing, guys, make sure that you're tidy, your handwriting is understandable. That is the basic thing. Remember, at the end of the day, there are human beings marking your exam, so you really want to impress them. Now, last thing that I'll tell you before you go, guys, is the most important thing, guys, is practice. Practice, practice, practice. Knowledge comes so far. So you do require all the knowledge for AAA, but the most important thing is practice, because this is purely an application-based paper. I hope this video helped, and good luck in your exam.